What's up, everybody? This is Anthony with Trigger Warning Conjugate, doing another Q&A off of the Instagram and the Facebook. So let's get started with these. Roy Lifts asks, what are some of the most significant changes you've made to improve your bench? And what advice would you give to a newer equipped bencher? So I found that if your raw bench is going up, and your equipped bench is not, it's the shirt or technique. There's no way that the two don't correlate otherwise. So getting stronger raw, assuming that you have the right bench shirt, assuming that your technique is good, will carry over. For me, it's been getting in my shirt less has helped my bench go up, and not staying on high boards, like always bringing it down to at least a 2 or a 1, or a lot of times a half, and sort of not killing myself earlier in the week when I know I'm getting in a bench shirt. That's helped so that I'm fresh for that. For new equipped benchers, I would say getting down to a 1 board and touching on a semi-regular basis is pretty important. You want to feel confident that you can do those things. Because when it comes to equipped powerlifting, touching in a bench shirt is probably the hardest thing out of anything that has to do with that sport. So I would like to see newer lifters in equipment touching frequently in a bench shirt so that they're comfortable with it. So I hope that helps. The Alaskan Rogue asks, how do you program for dynamic effort pendulums when changing main movements every week? Is the dynamic effort percentage used on Friday, Sunday based on the max effort movement used Monday, Wednesday? So I'm not 100% sure on what you're asking here. Waving dynamic work is pretty straightforward. 3-week waves most of the time. With bench, it's anywhere from 30% to 50%, depending of your raw bench. With squats, it's usually between, including the accommodating resistance, between like 65 and 85, depending on percent. I'd say with newer lifters, you'd want to base your dynamic work off of the percentages off of your max with that bar to a box. A lot of times there's a big discrepancies between different bars when you're a newer lifter. More experienced people, generally their bars are close enough that they can just base it off the percentage of their free squat. But as far as the percentages being based on stuff you do earlier in the week, that's not something I've ever messed around with. I don't think it's really necessary. It's like overcomplicating things. So kind of separate the two and just rotate every 3 weeks. And then the max effort movements don't really have anything to do with the percentages on that week necessarily, unless you happen to be using the same bar. Which isn't bad, but it's not something that I would intentionally do. All right, moving right along. Ram Fam Mazing asks, can you explain the importance of the time frame that openers, squat, bench, deadlift are taken in meet prep? So you want to take them close enough that you feel confident and that you've done them recently, but far enough out that they're not going to necessarily beat you down getting ready. So typically 3-ish weeks out is what I would say. We usually do 3 weeks or 4 weeks out for squat openers, 3 weeks out for bench opener, 2 or 3 weeks out for deadlift opener. So it really depends on how big the weights you're lifting are. So if you're a newer lifter and you have smaller weights, you can take those openers a little closer. Whereas if you're lifting bigger weights, you'd want to take your openers a little further out so you have more time to recover, because someone squatting 1,000 pounds for an opener, it's going to beat them up a little bit more taking that in the gym than someone who's opening with, let's say, 200 pounds. So someone with a 200-pound squat could take those openers maybe 2 weeks out, and then just deload and go into the meet. So it's kind of personal preference, but typically 3 to 4 weeks out is safe for just about everybody. Farnhamar asks, Could you explain when to train in gear? For example, when to train in your suit with straps up, straps down, or just briefs? So dynamic work will always be in briefs. In my opinion, I think that's the smartest play. If you're an equipped lifter, get in your briefs for all of your dynamic work. As far as getting in a suit, if you're going to a box in your suit, I think your straps should be down. If you are free squatting, straps are up. So if your suit is on, put the straps up. To me, it's just going to help you get used to having the pressure of those straps. It adds another element. So put them on earlier with the lighter weights so you can be more patient in the bottom, and get used to how the straps are going to feel when you're taking the heavier weights. As far as how often, bench shirt every between 3 weeks and 5 weeks, depending. Some people put it out farther than that. Some people are in a bench shirt every other week. It depends on what you can recover from. As far as free squatting, in full gear, every 5 weeks, 4 weeks. I know there are people who get in their suit more frequently than that. I've just found that for me, if it's closer than 4 weeks, it's just a little too much. So on the safer side, spread them out. And then obviously if you're further out from a competition, you could do every 8 weeks or whatever it may be. Okay, NH Lifter 603 asks, how to properly set up a good training cycle wave and long-term to meet for raw lifter and wraps. So this is like an incredibly vague question. There's not really training cycles per se with conjugate. You're kind of always in meet prep. In theory, you could just take a deload week and go into a meet because you're already handling stuff in your 90% to 100% range basically every week. So if you had the confidence to do that, in theory, you could totally do that. Just take a week off, go into the meet. I think it's good that you're thinking about looking at your training cycle as a whole. You want to be looking at it from, 100,000 foot view from above. You don't want to be just looking to the next day. You want to be looking the next couple weeks or month, and if you're going to plan it out that way. But as far as setting up a training cycle, it's just conjugate. So you just run your conjugate template into your Circumax if you do Circumax, deload and go into a meet. It doesn't really change for people who are raw and in wraps. I'd say the only big difference is if you're a raw lifter, I would say you box squat less frequently. So something that I picked up from Laura Phelps at the sweatshop is raw lifters going into a meet, maybe the last 6 weeks of dynamic work is a free squat against chains instead of doing all box squat, because then you're free squatting more going into a meet, and it'll help you, confidence with the free squat. And then also I think it's important if you're a raw lifter, wraps or not, I'd say every third or fourth week of your max effort should be some sort of free squat. In your wraps if you wear them, or in your sleeves if you wear them, whatever it may be. You don't want to lose the confidence in that movement. Box squats will 100% help your free squat. That is proven. If you're doing them properly, they will get you better at free squatting, but it's a different movement, especially for a raw lifter. So it's important to separate the two, and you want to be free squatting frequently enough that you remember it and you're confident in it. So as you get closer to a meet, you might do every other week is a free squat of some sort. You could do it against chains, bands, different bar, whatever. But I think that's important, even if you did it as an accessory, sets of 5 or 8, just to get that movement, you used to that movement more frequently. As you get closer to the meet, the specificity will be higher, and you won't just be only box squatting going into the meet. So I hope that helps. Okay, Eclipse.74 asks, what's the best way to set the drawstrings on the Leviathan Ultra Pro in the torso, hips, and thighs for hitting depth when first starting to use a suit, especially for someone new to gear? So the good thing about an Ultra Pro is you can change stuff. You can make different things tighter. The bad part about an Ultra Pro is it's hard to make it consistent. So the only way you can make it, the most consistent you can make it is do them as tight as you can all the way through, or do them as loose as you can all the way through. It's really difficult to make it exactly the same every time. But what I have found personally for me is that for newer lifter, when I was first getting used to that suit, I wore everything pretty loose all the way through. I wore tight briefs and I wore the suit pretty loose just to get used to it. And then you can kind of tighten it up as you go. But I would say pretty much a foolproof plan on wearing that as a new lifter is tighten the hips, probably a 6 to 7 out of 10. The torso section, you'd want maybe like a 4 or 5 out of 10, like loose, just snug them up a little bit. And then the legs, probably 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, nothing crazy. I liked mine super loose, but some people like the compression on their legs. That way, it's like wearing an extra set of briefs with some loose straps. It's just gonna add a little bit to the torso, and then you could put the straps on snug. And the biggest thing with the Ultra Pros, you could get them so tight, and then people get under the bar, and they can't breathe. They can't expand their belly anymore because they're so tight, and a lot of times the Ultra Pros will come a lot higher than the old canvases. So I would say for a new lifter, I'm assuming you're speaking about yourself, I would take the whole thing and just wear it loose. And when you first start, put it on, have somebody snug it all the way down, just like literally so that the strings are touching, so that's snugged up. And then have them go back through it and just pull it like maybe another inch more. And then take your first squat in the suit. And then you can adjust it from there. The problem with that suit is people get excited and they want it as tight as it can go. And a lot of times that doesn't work because of the inconsistencies with having the different strings in different places. It's a great suit if you could get it dialed in. So just, I've seen people make markings on the strings themselves so that they know, like, this is where I had it last time, and then they can just slide it there and then it's perfect. But until then, I would start loose and then sort of build up to it. Generally tight in the hips, loose everywhere else, and then it'll just be like a pair of briefs that are, a little taller. Okay, so that wraps up this question and answer segment. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any more questions or you want clarification on any of these, just shoot me a DM and I'll gladly get back to you as soon as I can. If you have any questions about coaching or anything like that, just shoot me a DM or go to twcstatehated.com and you'll be able to find a link for an email in there. Thanks for watching.